The sound of soft weeping carried across the prairie wind like a wounded bird's call, and Owen Winslow reined in his chestnut mare to listen more carefully through the fading light of an August evening in 1878. He had been riding hard from Enid, Oklahoma Territory, where he had sold a small herd of cattle, and his body ached from 3 days in the saddle. The last thing he expected to find by the shallow river that cut through this lonely stretch of grassland was a woman crying as though her heart would break into 1,000 pieces. Owen dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the dusty earth with a muted thud. He was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of ranch work, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He approached carefully, not wanting to startle whoever was making such sorrowful sounds. As he came around a cluster of cottonwood trees, he saw her sitting on a flat rock by the water's edge, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with the force of her tears. She wore a simple calico dress that had seen better days, mud stained along the hem, and her dark auburn hair had come loose from its pins, falling in disheveled waves past her shoulders. Owen cleared his throat gently, and she looked up with a gasp, her green eyes wide with alarm. Her face was pale beneath the tear tracks, and there was a bruise forming along her left cheekbone that made Owen's jaw tighten. "Madam," he said softly, keeping his distance and holding his hands where she could see them, "I don't mean you any harm. I heard you crying and wanted to make sure you were all right." She stared at him for a long moment, clearly debating whether to run or stay. Her hands trembled as she wiped at her wet cheeks. "I am fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the words, betraying the lie. Owen looked around the empty prairie, then back at her. "With respect, madam, you do not look fine. You are out here alone in the coming dark, and that bruise on your face tells a story I do not think has a happy ending." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, and she looked away from him, her hands clenching in her lap. "Please just leave me be. I do not need anyone's help." Instead of leaving, Owen walked a bit closer and then sat down on the ground about 10 feet from her rock, close enough to talk comfortably but far enough to give her space. He took off his worn Stetson and set it beside him, running a hand through his brown hair. "I am Owen," he said simply. "Owen Winslow. I have a small ranch about 20 miles west of here." She did not respond, but she did not tell him to leave again either. She just sat there, hugging herself as if trying to hold the broken pieces together. "You know," Owen continued, his voice gentle and unhurried, "when I was about 12 years old, my mother died of fever. My father, he did not know what to do with his grief, so he just kept working from sunup to sundown. Would not talk about her, would not let me talk about her. Just worked himself near to death trying to outrun the sadness." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the slow-moving water. "It took me years to understand that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let yourself feel it, let yourself hurt, and let someone sit with you while you do." The woman's shoulders began to shake again, and she let out a sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Owen just sat there, patient and still, while she cried. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and still he sat. After what might have been 10 minutes or might have been 30, her crying began to slow. She took a shuddering breath and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "My name is Audrey," she said quietly. "Audrey Nichols." "It is good to meet you, Audrey," Owen said, as if they were being introduced at a church social instead of beside a lonely river in the wilderness. She almost smiled at that, just the barest twitch of her lips. "You are a strange man, Owen Winslow, sitting on the ground talking to a crying woman you do not even know." "I have been called worse things than strange," he replied with a small smile of his own. "Would you like to tell me what happened, Or would you rather just sit in silence for a while?" Audrey was quiet for a long moment, and Owen thought she might choose silence. But then she began to speak, her voice soft but steady. "I was traveling with my husband. We were married 3 months ago back in Missouri. He said we were coming out here to make our fortune, that Oklahoma territory was full of opportunity for a man willing to work hard." She laughed bitterly. What he did not tell me was that he was running from debts and from a woman he had already married back in St. Louis. Owen felt anger kindle in his chest, but he kept his expression calm and let her continue. "We got as far as Enid, and then his past caught up with him. 2 men came looking for him yesterday, saying he owed them money from a card game gone bad. He told them he did not have the money, that he had spent it all getting us here, so they beat him." She touched the bruise on her face lightly. "He came back to our room at the boarding house and he was so angry. He started drinking, and the more he drank, the meaner he got. Started saying it was my fault, that if I had brought more money to the marriage he would not be in this mess. He hit me and I ran. Just ran out into the street and kept running until I could not run any more." "Where is he now?" Owen asked carefully. "I do not know. I do not care." She looked down at her hands. "I walked for hours until I got out here. I have nowhere to go, no money, no family out here. My parents back in Missouri disowned me when I married him against their wishes. They said I was making a mistake, that there was something not right about him, but I would not listen. I thought I knew better." More tears slipped down her face. "They were right, and now I have nothing." Owen stood up slowly and walked closer, stopping a respectful distance from her rock. "You have your life," he said firmly. "That man could have killed you, but you got away. That takes courage." "I am not brave," Audrey said, shaking her head. "I am terrified. I do not know what I am going to do." "Well," Owen said, "first thing you are going to do is get off that cold rock and let me make a fire. Then we are going to figure out the rest. I have some jerky and hardtack in my saddlebag. It is not much, but it is food." Audrey looked at him uncertainly. "Why are you helping me?" "You do not know me. I could be lying about everything." Owen met her eyes steadily. "I do not think you are lying, and even if you were, I could not ride away and leave a woman alone out here with night coming on. My mother raised me better than that." For the first time since he had found her, Audrey's expression softened with something other than pain. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting so long. "Thank you," she whispered. Owen gathered deadfall wood and built a small fire as the darkness settled in around them. The flames crackled and popped, pushing back the shadows, and Audrey held her hands out toward the warmth. Owen retrieved his saddlebag and pulled out the promised jerky and hardtack, along with a canteen of water. They ate in companionable silence, and Owen noticed that Audrey seemed to relax a bit as her hunger was satisfied. "Tell me about your ranch," Audrey said after a while, her voice stronger now. Owen leaned back against a tree trunk, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "It is not much, just 160 acres that I claimed 5 years ago when I turned 21. Built the house and barn myself, mostly. Got about 50 head of cattle right now, couple of horses. It is hard work, but it is mine, you know. No one can take it from me." "It sounds lonely," Audrey observed. "Sometimes it is," Owen admitted. "I hired a couple of hands during roundup and branding season, but mostly it is just me and the animals. I go into Enid maybe once a month for supplies and to sell whatever I can. It is not the life I imagined when I was younger, but it is a good life." "What did you imagine when you were younger?" Owen smiled at the memory. "I wanted to be a doctor, believe it or not, wanted to help people, heal them. But after my mother died and it was just me and my father, there was no money for that kind of education. So I learned ranching instead, and when my father passed 4 years ago, I came out here to start fresh." Audrey was quiet for a moment, studying him in the firelight. "You have kind eyes," she said suddenly, then looked embarrassed. "I am sorry, that was forward of me." "No need to apologize," Owen said, feeling his own face warm. "I will take that as a compliment." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face despite the bruise and the tear-stained cheeks. It was like watching the sun break through storm clouds, and Owen felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in a very long time. They talked late into the night, long after the fire had burned down to glowing coals. Audrey told him about growing up in Missouri, about her love of reading, and how she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. Owen told her about learning to break horses from an old Kiowa man who had worked for his father, about the first time he had delivered a calf on his own, and thought he was going to lose both the cow and the baby, but they had both survived. When Audrey's eyes began to droop with exhaustion, Owen spread out his bedroll for her near the fire. "You take this," he said. "I will keep watch." "You need to sleep too," Audrey protested weakly. "I will be fine. You are safe, Audrey. I give you my word on that." She looked at him with such gratitude that it made his throat tight. "I believe you," she said softly, and then she lay down and was asleep within minutes. Owen sat with his back against the tree, his rifle across his lap, and watched the stars wheel slowly overhead. He found himself thinking about the smile he had coaxed from Audrey, and how it had felt like winning something precious. He thought about the bastard who had hurt her, and he was glad he did not know where the man was, because the temper Owen usually kept well controlled was simmering close to the surface. But mostly he thought about the woman sleeping trustingly by his fire, and how in the space of a few hours she had become important to him in a way he could not quite explain. When dawn broke over the prairie, painting the grass gold and silver with dew, Owen had a pot of coffee brewing over the rebuilt fire. Audrey woke slowly, looking disoriented for a moment before her eyes found him, and she relaxed. "Good morning," Owen said, handing her a tin cup of strong black coffee. "Good morning." She accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping both hands around it. "I cannot remember the last time I slept so soundly. You needed it." Owen poured himself a cup and sat down across the fire from her. "I have been thinking about what you should do next." Audrey's expression became guarded. "I suppose you think I should go back to Enid and turn myself in to whatever passes for law there. Why would you turn yourself in? You did not do anything wrong." "I am a married woman who ran away from her husband. That is wrong in the eyes of most people." Owen shook his head firmly. "That man is not your husband. If he was already married when he married you, then your marriage is not legal. You are not bound to him, Audrey." She looked stunned, as if this had not occurred to her. "I had not thought of it that way." "Well, it is true, but going back to Enid alone might not be safe, especially if that man is still there looking for you." Owen took a breath, about to suggest something that surprised even himself. "You could come with me. To my ranch, I mean. You could stay there while you figure out what you want to do next. I have a spare room in the house. You would be safe, and you would have time to think without worrying about where your next meal is coming from." Audrey stared at him, her green eyes wide. "I could not do that. It would not be proper. People would talk. People always talk. Besides, my nearest neighbor is 15 miles away. Not many people to gossip out there." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Look, I am not proposing anything improper. I am just offering you a safe place to stay until you get back on your feet. You can help around the ranch if it would make you feel better about accepting help. I could use someone who can cook better than I can, and the house could use a woman's touch. But mainly, you would just be safe. No strings, no expectations. Just kindness between two people who needed to cross paths." Audrey's eyes filled with tears again, but these seemed different from the heartbroken sobs of last night. "Why are you doing this? You do not know anything about me." "I know enough," Owen said simply. "I know you are brave enough to run from danger. I know you are honest about your mistakes. I know you have a beautiful smile that should be seen more often. And I know that if I ride away from here and leave you on your own, I will regret it for the rest of my life." She was silent for a long moment, and Owen could see her wrestling with the decision. Finally, she nodded slowly. "All right, I will come with you, at least for a little while. But I will work for my keep, Owen. I will not be a burden." "Deal," Owen said, and he smiled at her, feeling lighter than he had in years. They broke camp and headed west, Audrey riding behind Owen on his mare since he had no other horse to offer. She held onto his waist lightly at first, careful and distant. But as the miles passed and she grew tired, she leaned against his back, and Owen found he did not mind at all. They rode through rolling prairie land dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stand of trees. Owen pointed out landmarks, telling her about the geography of the area, and Audrey listened with genuine interest. She asked intelligent questions about ranching and the challenges of the territory, and Owen found himself enjoying the conversation more than he had enjoyed anything in a long time. It was late afternoon when they finally reached Owen's ranch. The house was a modest structure of wood and stone, single-story with a covered porch across the front. The barn and a few outbuildings stood nearby, all in good repair. Fences marked off pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the summer heat. "It is not much," Owen said as he helped Audrey down from the horse, "but it is solid and the roof does not leak." "It is wonderful," Audrey said, and she sounded like she meant it. She looked around at the well-tended buildings and the neat yard. "You have built something good here, Owen." He felt a surge of pride at her words. "Come on, I will show you inside." The interior of the house was sparse but clean. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, and two bedrooms separated by a short hallway. Owen's furniture was simple and handmade, but everything was well crafted and functional. "This room here is yours," Owen said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. It contained a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. A window looked out over the prairie. "It is not fancy, but the mattress is good and there are extra blankets in the dresser." Audrey walked into the room slowly, running her hand over the quilt. "I cannot believe you are doing this for me," she said quietly. "Believe it," Owen replied. "Now, I need to tend to the horses and check on the cattle before dark. You make yourself at home and I will be back in an hour or so to start supper." "I can make supper," Audrey offered quickly. "You said you could use someone who can cook." Owen grinned. "I will not argue with that. There is salt pork and beans in the pantry, flour and such. Whatever you can make from what is there will be better than what I usually manage." After Owen left to do his chores, Audrey explored the house more thoroughly. She found the pantry well stocked with basics, and she set about making a proper meal. It felt good to be doing something useful, something normal. As she worked, she found herself thinking about Owen and his unexpected kindness. She had been so certain that all men were like her false husband, selfish and cruel, but Owen was proving her wrong with every passing hour. When Owen came back in, tired and dusty from his work, the house smelled like home-cooked food. Audrey had managed to create a meal of fried salt pork, beans seasoned with a bit of molasses she had found, and fresh biscuits. Owen's face lit up when he saw the table set and the food ready. "Lord have mercy," he said reverently. "That looks better than anything I have eaten in months." They sat down together, and Owen said a simple grace before they ate. The food was delicious, and Owen told her so repeatedly, making Audrey laugh with his enthusiastic compliments. After supper, Audrey insisted on cleaning up while Owen checked on some paperwork he had been neglecting. As the evening settled in, they found themselves sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The air was cooling down and a gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. "Thank you, Owen," Audrey said softly, "for all of this, for sitting with me last night, for bringing me here, for giving me a chance to breathe and think." "You do not need to keep thanking me," Owen replied. "I am glad you are here." They sat in comfortable silence, and Audrey felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt safe. She felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The next several weeks fell into a routine that felt natural and right. Audrey took over the cooking and most of the housework, but she also insisted on learning about the ranch. Owen taught her how to tend the chickens he kept for eggs, how to milk the 2 cows, and even how to mend fence. She was a quick learner and was not afraid of hard work. In turn, Audrey brought life to the lonely ranch in ways Owen had not anticipated. She sang while she worked, old hymns and folk songs that made the house feel warm and lived in. She planted a small vegetable garden near the house, coaxing tomatoes and beans and squash from the Oklahoma soil. She found Owen's collection of books, dusty and neglected, on a high shelf, and in the evenings, she would read aloud while Owen worked on mending tack or other small chores. They talked about everything and nothing. Owen told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, maybe breeding horses as well as raising cattle. Audrey confided that she still wanted to teach someday, that she loved children and learning. They argued good-naturedly about books and politics, and whether biscuits were better made with lard or butter. Owen found himself watching for her smile, finding excuses to make her laugh. He loved the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she was truly amused, the way she would cover her mouth with her hand as if her joy was something to be hidden. He started bringing her small gifts from his wanderings around the ranch, interesting stones, wildflowers, a bird's nest that had fallen from a tree. Audrey found herself thinking about Owen constantly. She noticed the way his hands, so strong and capable, could be incredibly gentle when he was handling a newborn calf or mending a broken bird's wing. She saw how hard he worked from before dawn until after dark, but he never complained. She watched the way he treated his animals with respect and kindness, and she thought about how different he was from the man she had run from. One evening, about a month after she had arrived, they were sitting on the porch after supper when Owen cleared his throat awkwardly. "I need to go into Enid tomorrow," he said. "I have to pick up some supplies and sell a couple of steers. I was thinking you might want to come with me." Audrey felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "I do not know if that is a good idea. What if he is still there?" "I have been thinking about that," Owen said. "I think we should find out what happened to him. You cannot live in fear forever, Audrey, and if he is still in Enid causing trouble, then maybe we need to talk to the marshal about the situation. You said yourself that your marriage was not legal. That means he has no claim on you." Audrey twisted her hands in her lap. "I am afraid," she admitted. Owen reached over and gently covered her hands with one of his. It was the first time he had touched her beyond helping her on and off the horse, and Audrey felt warmth spread through her at the contact. "I know you are," Owen said softly, "but I will be right there with you. I will not let anything happen to you, Audrey. I promise you that." She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. His storm-gray eyes were steady and sure, and she felt something inside her settle and strengthen. "All right," she said. "I will go." Owen squeezed her hand gently before letting go, and they sat together watching the stars come out until the night grew cool and they went inside to sleep. The ride to Enid the next day took most of the morning. Owen drove a wagon with 2 steers tied behind, and Audrey sat beside him on the bench seat. As they got closer to town, Audrey grew quieter and more tense. Owen wanted to reach over and take her hand again, to reassure her, but he kept his hands on the reins and his eyes on the road. Enid was a bustling territorial town of maybe 500 people, with a main street lined with businesses and several side streets of homes and boarding houses. Owen drove the wagon to the stockyard first, where he sold the steers for a fair price. Then he drove to the general store and helped Audrey down from the wagon. "Let me do the asking around," Owen said quietly. "You stay close to me, and if you see him, you tell me right away." Inside the store, Owen greeted the proprietor, a middle-aged man named Henry Dalton. While Audrey looked at fabric and other goods, Owen engaged Henry in conversation. "Say, Henry, I am trying to track down a man who might have been here about a month ago. Fellow from Missouri, probably in debt to some people. You hear about anything like that?" Henry's expression darkened. "You talking about that scoundrel who was running a crooked card game out of the saloon? Fellow named James Nichols." Audrey froze at the name, and Owen noticed. He kept his voice casual. "That might be him. What happened?" "Got himself shot about 3 weeks ago," Henry said, shaking his head. "Tried to cheat the wrong man in a poker game. The other fellow called him on it. Nichols went for his gun, and the other man was faster. Marshall ruled it self-defense. We buried Nichols in the town cemetery the next day." Owen felt the weight of this news settle over him. He glanced at Audrey and saw that she had gone pale but was holding herself together. "There was a woman with him," Owen said carefully. "Dark red hair, pretty. Anyone know what happened to her?" Henry shrugged. "He said she ran off. Some folks thought maybe he had killed her and dumped the body somewhere, but no one could prove it." "Why are you asking?" "Just curious," Owen said. "I heard about it from someone passing through." He quickly finished his purchases, loading supplies into the wagon while Audrey waited silently beside it. Once they were out of town and headed back toward the ranch, Audrey finally spoke. "He is dead." "Yes." "I should feel something," Audrey said, her voice strange and distant. "Relief, maybe, or sadness, but I just feel numb." Owen pulled the wagon to a stop beside the road and turned to face her. "You feel however you need to feel. There is no right or wrong here." Audrey's eyes filled with tears. "I wasted so much time on him. I left my family, my home, everything I knew, for a man who was not even who he said he was. And now he is dead and I am free, but I also have nothing. No family, no home, no future." "That is not true," Owen said firmly. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You have a home, Audrey. With me, for as long as you want it. And you have a future, whatever future you decide to make. You are strong and smart and capable, and you survived something that would have broken a lot of people." "You barely know me," Audrey whispered, but she was leaning into his touch. "I know you well enough," Owen said. His heart was pounding, and he knew he was about to cross a line they could not uncross. "I know that you have made my house a home. I know that I look forward to seeing your face every morning and hearing your voice every evening. I know that when I think about my future now, you are in it." Audrey's breath caught. "Owen." "I am not saying you have to feel the same way," Owen continued quickly. "I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you need is pressure from me, but I wanted you to know how I feel. I care about you, Audrey, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time." For a moment, Audrey just looked at him, her green eyes searching his face. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative. Owen froze in surprise for a heartbeat, then kissed her back gently, his hand coming up to cup her face. When they broke apart, Audrey was crying again, but she was also smiling. "I care about you too," she said. "I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it. I was afraid I could not trust my own judgment after what happened with James. But you are nothing like him. You are kind and honest and good, and I do not want to leave your ranch. I want to stay." "Then stay," Owen said simply. "Stay forever." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Owen picked up the reins and started the horses moving again, and Audrey scooted closer to him on the bench seat, her shoulder pressed against his. The future suddenly looked brighter and more full of possibility than either of them had imagined possible. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Owen's life. He and Audrey courted properly, even though they were living under the same roof. Owen was careful to respect her space and her healing process. They held hands while walking around the ranch. They stole kisses in the barn and on the porch. They talked late into the night about their hopes and dreams and fears. Audrey bloomed like a flower in the sun. The shadows left her eyes, and her smile came more easily. She laughed often and sang all the time. She threw herself into improving the ranch, and Owen marveled at her energy and creativity. She made curtains for the windows, planted flowers around the porch, and even helped him build a better chicken coop. Owen took her riding across the prairie, showing her the land he loved. They picnicked by streams and watched sunsets from hilltops. He taught her to shoot a rifle, just in case, and she turned out to be a natural marksman. She taught him to dance in the main room of the house, humming the music since they had no instruments, and Owen stomped on her toes so many times they ended up laughing too hard to continue. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, Owen turned to Audrey with a serious expression. "I have something to ask you," he said, and his voice was nervous in a way she had rarely heard. Audrey's heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" Owen took her hand, and she could feel that his palm was slightly damp with sweat. "When I found you by that river, I never imagined how much you would come to mean to me. You have brought light and life and joy to this place, to my life. I cannot imagine going back to how things were before you." "I do not want to." He slid off the bench and onto one knee in front of her, and Audrey's free hand flew to her mouth. "Audrey Nichols, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The real thing this time, with a real preacher and real vows. I want to spend the rest of my life making you smile, making you happy, loving you the way you deserve to be loved. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Audrey's face, but she was grinning so wide it almost hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you. I love you so much." Owen surged up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other under the vast Oklahoma sky, feeling like the luckiest two people in the world. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Enid. Owen had invited their nearest neighbors, and Audrey had made friends with several of the women in town during their trips for supplies. It was a simple ceremony, but it was filled with genuine joy and love. Audrey wore a dress she had sewn herself from beautiful blue fabric Owen had bought her, and she carried wildflowers Owen had picked that morning. Owen wore his best suit, brushed and pressed with care, and when he saw Audrey walking toward him down the aisle, his eyes got misty. They exchanged vows in front of God and witnesses, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and told Owen he could kiss his bride, Owen did so tenderly, aware of everyone watching but caring only about the woman in his arms. The small reception afterward was held at the church, with food brought by neighbors and friends. People congratulated them warmly, and several women pulled Audrey aside to tell her how lucky she was to have caught such a good man. Audrey agreed wholeheartedly, her eyes constantly seeking Owen across the room. They drove back to the ranch in the wagon as the sun was setting. Audrey snuggled against Owen's side. When they arrived home, Owen insisted on carrying her over the threshold, making Audrey laugh and protest that he would hurt his back. But he swept her up easily and carried her inside, kicking the door closed behind them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Winslow," he said, setting her down gently. "I like the sound of that," Audrey said, reaching up to cup his face. "Mrs. Winslow." That night they came together as husband and wife, and it was everything first times should be: tender, awkward, sweet, and full of love. Owen was patient and gentle, always checking to make sure Audrey was all right, that she wanted to continue. Audrey had been nervous, her previous experience having been so unpleasant, but Owen made it beautiful. He kissed her like she was precious, touched her like she was made of fine porcelain, and loved her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever prayed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Owen's bed, which was now their bed, and talked in whispers about nothing important. Audrey traced patterns on Owen's chest with her fingertip, marveling at how safe and loved she felt. Owen played with strands of her hair, thinking about how his life had changed so completely in such a short time. "I sat down beside you that night with no plan except to keep you company until you stopped crying," Owen said quietly. "I never imagined it would lead to this. You sat with me until I smiled," Audrey remembered, "and then you stayed. You actually stayed." "I will always stay," Owen promised, kissing her forehead. "Forever, Audrey. I am yours forever." The winter that followed was cold and sometimes harsh, but inside the ranch house there was only warmth and love. Audrey and Owen settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night. They argued occasionally, usually about small things, but they always made up quickly, neither willing to let hurt feelings fester. Audrey continued to blossom as a rancher's wife. She learned to read the weather, to anticipate the needs of the animals, to manage supplies so they never ran short during long winter weeks when travel was difficult. She also began teaching reading and writing to the children of neighboring ranches, holding classes in their home once a week. It was not the formal teaching position she had once dreamed of, but it fulfilled that part of her heart that needed to nurture young minds. Owen expanded the ranch slowly but steadily. He bought more cattle with the money he saved, built an additional barn, and began breeding horses as he had dreamed. Audrey turned out to have a gift with horses, especially the skittish ones, and together they developed a reputation for producing quality mounts. In the spring, Audrey discovered she was pregnant. She told Owen one morning over breakfast, simply and directly, watching his face carefully for his reaction. Owen's expression went from confused to comprehending to utterly joyful in the space of about 3 seconds. He jumped up from his chair so fast he knocked it over, rounded the table, and pulled Audrey into a careful hug. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I am sure," Audrey said, laughing at his reaction. "The baby should come in late October or early November." Owen knelt down and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your father. I just want you to know that you are already so loved, and I cannot wait to meet you." Audrey ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was what happiness felt like, she realized. This was what love was supposed to be. The pregnancy progressed well, though Audrey had some difficult weeks of morning sickness in the beginning. Owen hovered anxiously, trying to help in whatever way he could. He took over more of the heavy work, insisted Audrey rest frequently, and generally treated her like she was made of spun glass. Audrey tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from a place of love and fear. As summer turned to fall and Audrey's belly grew round and prominent, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Owen built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving intricate designs into the sides. Audrey sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small they were. They transformed a corner of their bedroom into a nursery area, and neighbors donated items their own children had outgrown. In early November, on a crisp morning with frost on the ground, Audrey's labor began. Owen rode hard to fetch the nearest woman with midwifery experience, a sturdy frontier woman named Mrs. Patterson who lived 10 miles away. She arrived to find Owen pacing the porch like a caged animal while Audrey labored inside. "Get in there and be with your wife, Mrs. Patterson ordered, shooing him inside. "She needs you more than you need to wear a hole in that porch." The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Owen stayed by Audrey's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. He had helped countless animals give birth over the years, but watching the woman he loved go through this was completely different and infinitely more terrifying. Finally, as dawn was breaking, the baby arrived. A boy, strong and healthy, with a powerful set of lungs that he demonstrated immediately. Mrs. Patterson cleaned him up and wrapped him snugly, then placed him in Audrey's arms. Owen sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Audrey, both of them staring in wonder at the tiny person they had created. "He is perfect," Audrey whispered, tears running down her exhausted face. "Owen, look at him. He is perfect." "He is," Owen agreed, his own voice rough with emotion. He touched the baby's tiny hand, and the infant grasped his finger with surprising strength. "Hello, son. Welcome to the world." They named him Oliver, after Owen's father, with the middle name James, which surprised Owen until Audrey explained. "James is my father's name," she said. "I know I have not talked much about my family, but I have been thinking about them a lot lately. About how they tried to warn me, and I would not listen. About how they must have worried when they did not hear from me. I want to name our son after my father, and I want to write to my parents and tell them about you, about us, about their grandson. Life is too short to hold on to anger and pride, Owen. I want to make peace with them if I can." "Then we will," Owen said, kissing her temple. "We will write to them together." Over the following months, as Oliver grew from a newborn to an infant with a personality, Audrey and Owen fell even deeper in love, both with their son and with each other. They discovered that parenthood was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. There were sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, but there were also first smiles and the incredible softness of baby skin, and the way Oliver would calm instantly when Owen held him against his chest. Audrey's letter to her parents was answered 3 months after she sent it. Her mother wrote back, her words a mixture of relief, apology, and joy. They had thought Audrey might be dead, had spent months trying to find out what had happened to her. They were overjoyed to learn she was alive and well, married to a good man, and had given them a grandchild. Her mother begged Audrey's forgiveness for disowning her and invited them to visit Missouri whenever they could. Audrey cried over that letter for an hour, but they were healing tears. She wrote back immediately, offering her own apologies and forgiveness, and from then on, letters flowed regularly between Oklahoma Territory and Missouri. Her parents sent gifts for Oliver and promised to visit the following summer. As Oliver grew into a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Owen hired 2 full-time ranch hands, young men who were respectful and hard workers. This freed up more of Owen's time to spend with his family. Audrey's teaching had grown to the point where she was holding classes 3 times a week, and the territorial government had even started paying her a small stipend for her work. When Oliver was 3 years old, Audrey found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1883 they welcomed a daughter they named Alice Rose. She had Audrey's red hair and Owen's gray eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped completely around her tiny finger. Oliver was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help take care of her. Owen and Audrey would find him sitting beside her cradle, singing the songs Audrey sang, or trying to share his toys with her, even though she was too little to play with them. Life settled into a rhythm that was busy but deeply satisfying. The ranch was successful enough that they were able to make improvements. A larger house with separate bedrooms for the children, a proper schoolhouse for Audrey's teaching, better barns and fences. They saved money and invested wisely, always thinking ahead to the future. Audrey's parents did visit that summer when Alice was a few months old, and the reunion was emotional and healing for everyone. Her father and Owen got along well, and her mother doted on her grandchildren. They stayed for 2 weeks, and when they left, it was with promises to visit again soon and invitations for Audrey and Owen to bring the children to Missouri. The years passed in a beautiful blur. Oliver grew tall and strong, following his father everywhere and learning the ranching business from the ground up. Alice grew into a spirited, clever girl who loved horses as much as her mother did. When Oliver was 8 and Alice was 5, they were joined by another brother, Arthur, and 2 years later by a sister, Eleanor. The house was full of noise and life and love. There were scraped knees and childhood illnesses, school lessons and chores, laughter and occasional tears. Owen and Audrey navigated parenthood together, presenting a united front, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating victories together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Audrey back to the place where they had met, the river where he had found her weeping. They rode out on a beautiful summer evening, leaving the children in the care of one of the ranch hands and his wife. They sat on the same flat rock where Audrey had been crying all those years ago, and Owen pulled her close against his side. "You remember this place?" he asked. "Of course I do," Audrey said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "This is where my life began. My real life, I mean, the life I was supposed to have." "I think about that night sometimes," Owen said, "about how I almost did not stop. I was tired and it was getting dark and I almost just rode on past, if I had not heard you crying." "But you did hear me," Audrey interrupted gently. "You did stop. You sat with me until I smiled and then you stayed. You stayed forever, just like you promised." Owen turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Every moment with you, every day of our life together has been a gift. You and our children are everything I never knew I needed." "I love you," Audrey said, her eyes shining with tears. "I loved you from almost the very beginning, even when I was too afraid to admit it. You saved me, Owen. You saved my life and gave me a future I never dreamed I could have." "We saved each other," Owen corrected, kissing her softly. "I was just existing before you, just going through the motions. You made everything matter. You made me whole." They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking about the past and the future, about their children and their dreams. They made love under the vast Oklahoma sky, reconnecting in the place where their story had begun. When they finally rode back to the ranch in the early morning hours, they found all 4 children had crawled into Oliver's room and fallen asleep in a pile, waiting for their parents to come home. Owen and Audrey stood in the doorway, looking at their sleeping children, and felt such overwhelming love and gratitude that neither could speak. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of a growing family. The children thrived, each developing their own personalities and interests. Oliver showed a head for business and a skill with horses that rivaled his parents. Alice discovered a love for teaching and began helping Audrey with the younger students. Arthur was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book, talking about seeing the wider world someday. Eleanor was still young, but she showed signs of inheriting her father's gentleness and her mother's determination. Audrey and Owen faced challenges, as all marriages do. There were years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There was a terrible winter when they lost part of the herd to disease. There were illnesses and injuries, disappointments and setbacks. But they faced everything together, their love and commitment never wavering. They also knew great joys. They saw Oklahoma Territory become a state in 1907, celebrating with their neighbors and feeling pride in the community they had helped build. They watched their children grow and flourish. They traveled back to Missouri several times, and Audrey's parents came to visit regularly until her father passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895, followed by her mother 2 years later. As Owen and Audrey entered their 40s and then their 50s, they began to slow down a bit. Owen still worked the ranch, but Oliver had taken over most of the day-to-day management. Audrey still taught, but Alice had largely taken over the running of the school. They had more time for each other, for long walks and quiet evenings on the porch, for visiting with friends and spoiling the grandchildren who began arriving as their children married. Oliver married a sweet girl named Mary from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Owen and Audrey 3 grandchildren. Alice surprised everyone by marrying a lawyer from Enid, a scholarly man who adored her, and they had 2 children. Arthur went east for college, came back with a degree and a wife, and opened a bookstore in Enid while helping manage the ranch's finances. Eleanor married a cowboy who worked for them, a good man who treated her like she hung the moon, and they had 4 children in quick succession. Owen and Audrey's house, now expanded several times, was constantly full of family. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with children and grandchildren crowding around the long table Owen had built, everyone talking at once, sharing news and stories and laughter. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that included half the county. People came from miles around to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. There were speeches about Owen's fairness in business and Audrey's impact on education. There was dancing and food and music. But Owen's favorite moment came late in the evening when the party was winding down. He found Audrey on the porch, taking a break from the festivities, looking out over the ranch they had built together. "Tired?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "Happy tired," Audrey said, leaning into him. Her hair was gray now, and there were lines around her eyes, but to Owen, she was as beautiful as the day he had found her by the river. "Overwhelmed by how blessed we are." 30 years, Owen marveled. It has gone by so fast. And so slow, all at the same time, Audrey agreed. "I can still remember every detail of the night we met. The sound of the river, the way the moonlight looked on the water, the kindness in your eyes when you sat down beside me." "I fell in love with you that night," Owen confessed. "I did not know it then, but I did. The moment I saw your smile break through the tears, I was done for." Audrey turned in his arms to face him. "I need you to know something, Owen. I need you to understand how grateful I am, not just for this life we have built, but for being seen. You saw me at my absolute lowest, broken and lost and terrified, and you chose to stay. You saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. You gave me time to heal, you respected my fears, and you loved me into wholeness. That is a gift I can never repay." "You repay it every single day," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. Every morning I wake up beside you. Every time I hear you laugh. Every moment I watch you with our children and grandchildren. Every day of this beautiful life we have created together. That is all the repayment I could ever need or want. They kissed, long and sweet, and from inside the house, they heard their children and grandchildren start to cheer and whistle. Owen and Audrey broke apart laughing, and Owen swept Audrey into an impromptu dance right there on the porch, humming a waltz they both remembered from their wedding. The years continued to roll by. Owen and Audrey grew older, their bodies slowing down but their love remaining constant. They handed over more and more of the ranch operations to Oliver while still maintaining their presence and counsel. They spent their days enjoying their grandchildren, taking care of their home, and savoring every moment together. In the spring of 1915, Owen fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and despite Audrey's careful nursing and the doctor's best efforts, it became clear that this was something serious. Owen's lungs were failing, the doctor said gently. It happened sometimes to men who had spent their lives breathing in prairie dust and working in all weather. There was not much that could be done. Owen faced his mortality with the same steady courage he had faced everything in his life. He made sure his affairs were in order, that the ranch would pass smoothly to Oliver, that Audrey would be taken care of. But mostly, he spent his time with the people he loved. One evening, as spring turned to summer, with all the windows open to let in the warm breeze, Owen called Audrey to his side. The family had just left after a visit, and they were alone for the first time in hours. "Come here, my love," Owen said, his voice weak but clear. Audrey sat on the edge of the bed and took his hand. She had been crying for days, unable to stop the tears as she watched the man she loved fade away. "No more tears," Owen said gently, reaching up to wipe her cheeks. "We have had such a good life, Audrey. Such a good, full, beautiful life. Do not waste these last moments grieving. Let me see you smile one more time." "Owen," Audrey choked out, "I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to be in this world without you." "You will figure it out," Owen said with confidence. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived losing everything and built a new life from nothing. You can survive this too, and you will not be alone. Our children and grandchildren, they will take care of you. They love you so much." "Not as much as I love you," Audrey whispered. "Never as much as that." "I know," Owen said. "I love you the same way. From the moment I sat down beside you by that river until right now, you have been everything to me. And I am not sorry, not about any of it. If I had to do it all over again, knowing it would end here, I would still choose every single moment with you." Audrey tried to smile through her tears. "Do you remember what you said to me that night? You said you would stay forever." "And I did," Owen replied. 37 years, that is pretty close to forever, is it not?" He squeezed her hand weakly. "And in a way, I will always stay. Every time you look at our children and see my smile. Every time you ride across this ranch we built together. Every time you remember one of our stories or teach one of our grandchildren something I taught you, I will be there, always." They talked long into the night, remembering everything. Their first meeting, their first kiss, their wedding day. The births of their children, the growth of the ranch, the thousand small moments that had made up their life together. As dawn began to light the sky, Owen's breathing became more labored. "Audrey," he whispered, "I am here, my love. I am right here." "Thank you," Owen said. "Thank you for letting a lonely cowboy sit beside you that night. Thank you for staying with me, for building this life with me, for loving me. It has been the greatest honor of my life to be your husband." "The honor was mine," Audrey said, leaning down to kiss him one final time. I will love you forever, Owen Winslow, forever and always." Owen smiled, that same gentle smile that had first captured Audrey's heart. "Forever," he echoed. And then, peacefully, with the woman he loved holding his hand and the dawn breaking over the land they had claimed together, Owen took his last breath. The grief nearly broke Audrey, but she survived it as Owen had known she would. She leaned on her children and grandchildren, who rallied around her with love and support. She kept teaching for several more years, finding purpose in nurturing young minds as she always had. She stayed in the house on the ranch, refusing to move into town as some suggested, because this was where her memories lived. She lived for another 12 years, and they were good years, though tinged with the ache of missing Owen. She saw more grandchildren born and even a few great-grandchildren. She saw the ranch continue to prosper under Oliver's management. She saw Alice open a proper school in Enid. She saw Arthur's bookstore become a cultural hub of the community. She saw Eleanor's children grow tall and strong. On Sunday evenings, when the whole family gathered, Audrey would tell stories about Owen, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him or had only known him when he was old. She told them about the night by the river, about how he had sat beside her until she smiled. She told them about his kindness, his integrity, his gentle strength. She made sure they understood that the life they all enjoyed had been built on the foundation of one man's compassion and one woman's courage. In the summer of 1927, Audrey passed away peacefully in her sleep, just a few days short of her 72nd birthday. Her children found her in her bed, looking peaceful with a smile on her face. On her nightstand was a photograph of Owen, taken on their 25th wedding anniversary, and beside it was a dried wildflower pressed in a book, the same type of wildflower Owen had brought her on their first week together. They buried Audrey beside Owen in the cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch. The service was attended by over 200 people, all whose lives had been touched by the couple in some way. The preacher spoke about love and faith and the legacy of a life well lived. But the most moving moment came when Oliver stood up to speak about his parents. "My father once told me," Oliver said, his voice strong despite his tears, "that the best thing he ever did in his life was stop his horse one August evening in 1878 to investigate the sound of someone crying. He said that moment changed everything, that it led him to the love of his life and to all of us. My mother told me that the bravest thing she ever did was accept help from a stranger when she was at her lowest point. She said that trust led her to safety, to healing, and to a love that sustained her for nearly 50 years. Oliver looked out at the assembled crowd, at his siblings and their families, at the neighbors and friends who had become like family over the decades. They taught us that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every single day. It is sitting beside someone when they are hurting. It is staying when things get difficult. It is building something together, brick by brick, day by day, year by year. They showed us what it means to truly love someone, and that is a gift that will echo through our family for generations to come. As the sun set over the prairie that evening, painting the sky in the brilliant colors Owen and Audrey had watched together so many times, their family gathered at the ranch house for a meal. The table was crowded and loud, filled with love and life and laughter, just as Owen and Audrey would have wanted. And if you stood very still in the twilight and listened carefully, you might have heard the echo of a gentle voice saying, "Forever," carried on the Oklahoma wind. Because some promises are kept beyond death, and some loves truly do last forever. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of Oliver and his descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation laid by Owen and Audrey. The house where they had lived and loved was preserved and expanded, becoming a gathering place for an ever-growing family. The river where they had met became a special place where family members would go to think, to remember, and sometimes to find their own moment of clarity in difficult times. And in Enid, the school that Audrey had started grew into a respected institution, with a plaque at its entrance honoring her as the founder. It reads simply, "Founded by Audrey Nichols Winslow, who believed every child deserved the gift of education and every person deserved the gift of compassion." The story of the cowboy who found a woman weeping by the river and sat beside her until she smiled became family legend, passed down with care and reverence. It was told at weddings to remind couples of what real love looks like. It was told at difficult times to remind people of the power of compassion. It was told to children to teach them about kindness to strangers and the importance of not giving up when life seems darkest. Because in the end, that is what Owen and Audrey's story was really about. The transformative power of compassion, the strength found in vulnerability, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. One man's decision to stop and offer comfort to a stranger in pain had created a legacy of love that would extend far beyond his own lifetime, touching hundreds of lives and creating a family bound together not just by blood, but by the example of what it means to truly love someone. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, a cowboy and his wife walked together through eternal fields, holding hands and smiling, their love story complete but never really ending, because the best love stories never truly end at all. They just transform into something larger, becoming part of the fabric of the world, inspiring others to be brave enough to stop, compassionate enough to stay, and patient enough to sit beside someone until they smile. And then, if they are very lucky, to stay forever.